Hey, it's Cami with Coast DIY, and this is your stain shading tutorial. I have made this really cute cornucopia, and I did the design, but then I decided to make a change. That happens. And so I need to repaint it, and I decided that I should make a tutorial because I was really pleased with how I shaded the cornucopia, and I thought, gosh, that would make a really cute tutorial. So we're gonna make a tutorial. So I've got to repaint it, and I'm gonna turn that into a tutorial on how I got this to have just a little bit more accent. I never claimed to be like a folk art painter. That's a whole nother thing, but I was really pleased with how that turned out. So I'll walk you through how I did that with stain. And so stay tuned. Okay, so we're gonna have the video facing right onto the piece. Hopefully this will work out okay and my dogs will stay quiet. So I'm just gonna show you a couple of things. All I've got is a plate. I'm gonna put a little bit of stain on here. You're not gonna need a whole lot. If you've got a stain kit, this is Early American that I'm using. So any kit that's got Early American in it will work. And then I've got my old brush thing, but this is my brush kit that comes in the party pack. You can use any brushes, but I am going to use the widest brush that I've got. This happens to be a square brush, but you know, I'm not the best painter, so I don't think it's going to matter. But you do need clean water, and I suggest having a paper towel. And then something to paint on that you're not going to be too worried about. And we're actually going to start on this part of the piece. Now, the beauty about the cornucopia is for this piece, I'm gonna actually be painting this part black with paint. So I'm not gonna worry about anything that I get into this piece. So I'm actually gonna be going over this part with the stain, but I'm not gonna worry about that. And when I did this one, so let me show you this piece kind of close up. What I learned was, in doing it, it was easier to have a coat on first and have it be a little bit wet, because I tried to do my technique with it dry and it didn't quite go as well. So lesson learned. So I'm just gonna do that on this, and I'll start on this little piece first. Let me get my big brush. Now I'm gonna have here we go. I'm gonna get everything in the camera. I'm gonna have a wet brush. See how wet that is? And you can do multiple coats of this. So if the first time you do this, it doesn't quite look right, don't worry about it. It may make it a little bit darker, but that's okay. You can still get the technique going. So I'm just kind of getting this stain on my brush, and I'm not doing anything special other than a coat of stain, okay? No fancy technique right now. Just getting a light coat of stain on, and then I'm gonna dry my brush a little bit. I'd even rinse my brush just a little bit. And then what I wanna do is, it's gonna be a little bit wet. I want to dip into this wet stain, and I'm gonna tap right into the corner of my stain. See how that's really heavy? Toby, stop. And so I've got a heavy dollop of stain right on the corner. Now here's where you just gotta be a little bit careful. I'm gonna go over this like I said, and I'm just gonna pull carefully. And see how, because my brush was wet, see how it kind of does that natural shading for me? And I can do it again. And I'm just gonna pull. And I'm gonna leave that. We're gonna see how that dries. I'm gonna rinse that out. And do it again. I'm gonna get some of this that I made, create this base coat. Right? And I actually don't even need to dry my brush because I do like it to be a little bit wet. and then I dip that corner, right? And I'm gonna put it right there, and I'm gonna carefully drag it right along that line. And do it again. If it doesn't come out as far as you want, you can do something like this. On the bigger section, see how I come down a little bit? And then what I'll do, because it's gonna create a line, see that line? And then I'll come right up to the edge again, and that'll blend it. And we're gonna let that dry. That's looking like I blended it actually a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dip again. It does blend nicely. You don't want it to blend too much. I'm just gonna kind of keep pulling on that little section right there till I like how dark it is. There we go. And I'm barely touching right now. Here we go. Good. Now, I've used up a lot of my paint right here, so I'm just gonna dip in, even with my dirty brush, I'm just picking up some water. I'm gonna make more of this really thin down stain. I'm gonna get this section. Just putting a thin coat down, which also wets it. Now you don't want it to be, it's not watercolor, you don't want it to be wet, wet, wet like a watercolor if you're comfortable with watercolor, because it is wood, but you definitely want it wet enough that it will help the stain kind of pull out a little bit. Helps it blend on its own. Take your time right here. I'm comfortable with that. I'm gonna stop while I'm ahead. You know, I don't claim to be a great painter. That's not, I do love design. And I have taken some tool painting classes. I generally understand the techniques, but I'm not very good at them. I don't think I have the patience for a lot of the fun techniques that tool painters do. I have so much respect for people that have that capability. But I do think we can use a few of their techniques with stain to get a similar look. And remember, when you're using stain, it's gonna soak into the wood. It doesn't really sit on the top. I am taking my time. I'm not brushing hard here. I'm just kind of gently brushing. Do it again, wet my brush in the light stuff. Excuse the dog hair there. And then I'm gonna dip. And then I'm gonna come right here. Let me move my water. Oh. Okay, sorry, I had to pause it. My dogs were going after squirrels. Okay, so we're gonna very slowly, this is a very strong curve. You can pick up your brush. See how I've left that thing right there? So I'm just gonna come back again. See how strong that line is? That is because I got up to go deal with the dogs and the squirrel and my base coat dried. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get my brush wet. I'm gonna get some of this wet stain. I'm gonna do a really quick overall wash. It's gonna darken the whole section, but that's okay. It just means the oven was darker right there. I'm gonna dip my corner again and I'm gonna pull this one more time. So I've got that shading that I want. I just dried my brush a little bit to pull off some of this excess. You're not going to see this right here. That's in the black section, but just get it off. My brush is dry right now. All I'm doing is kind of cleaning off a little bit of the excess water to remove some of those lines. So the shading here wasn't quite as strong, but I like it. So I don't want to mess it up. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to come over here and grab some more of this lighter. Oops. Put my base coat down. And it's just the same process for each section. As I get to a smaller section, I may grab a smaller brush. You'll see that. I am doing it section by section, mostly because of what you just saw. If I were to try to do the base coat on the whole thing, it's going to dry before I can do my shading technique, which is fine, but what's going to happen is your piece will end up getting very dark because as you layer your stain, it just builds color. Okay, so something happened to my video. I don't know what happened, but I finished this off, and what happened, I switched to a smaller brush up here, and then I went back and I just did a second coat. No different change in technique. I literally did the exact same thing. So I just did a smaller brush up here, and I ended up doing this brush for these sections. And in the top section, like the top 4 sections, I did this small brush. So that was good. And then I'm gonna show you on the braid, I'm gonna do the braid a little bit different because it's a single piece with no real sections. You don't want to end up with lines in your stain. So I find it's going to be easier if you go ahead and do your coat all the way around, and I know it's going to dry. That's going to be how it's going to be. And I figure you're going to get a little bit of a darker color on this portion. So you do these as dark as you want. Now the score lines give you kind of a natural shadow. So you don't have to do anything else here if you don't want. But if you're feeling kind of fancy and you want to, you can grab a small brush like this, and you could right here, see how those lines curve a little bit? You don't need a lot. You could just a smidge line like that. And then, I was too soon. Put it on, let it soak for just a second. I might even do a couple. Actually, that's even better. This was a little dark. There we go. See how it just adds just a little bit of something? You need very little on your brush right here. If it's too dark, it's gonna stand out. You're really not looking to stand out. You're just wanting it to be a hint of something. You almost can barely even see it. I wish I had better lighting right now, but it's cloudy outside. And the space that I'm at gets usually really great sun. Yeah, you can barely see it, but that's, I mean, it's more, Just a little bit. Actually, I think you might do better with a less wet brush because I don't want it to run too far. Put just a little bit down. Notice that I take my finger if I think it's a little heavy. Just knock the edges off. I have very little on the brush. See how you can barely see it? But I think when it's standing up, it'll give you a little bit of dimension. And again, I don't think this is necessary. Just something to play with. I think the score lines themselves, I added that curve on purpose to give you just a little extra dimension. And, you know, you could probably do this, all of this with paint. If you watered it down, you wouldn't have the same, it's not going to soak into the wood the same. And it may fill up your score lines a little bit. So just be careful about that. Stain will go into the score line versus filling them up. Oh, look, see what happened there? And it bled out a little bit. Too much water on my brush at the time. I can hit that with the sanding block in a little bit. I think I like this more dry technique better with the stain than with the wet brush. So, and then I'm going to come back and do the inside. Nothing too fancy. First one's always a little heavy. I keep wiping that off a little bit. All right, so I had a little bleed here. And then I'm gonna let that dry, and then what I'm gonna do is just kind of, once these soak in a little bit, if I knock it all with the sanding block, some of this will settle. This is a little wet where I got a little pointy with my paintbrush. But I think that looks good. And then you will have to line these up Oh, well, that was luck. First glance, I got a little, yep, see? Took that right off. I love it. I hope you love it. I hope you enjoy trying your shading with stain. And then I'm gonna stop the video here, but then the rest of the video, I'm just gonna be playing with some stains. I might try little shading techniques with some colors on the rest of the cornucopia, but mostly it's just gonna be, it won't be any sound. It's just gonna be me painting the rest of the fruits and vegetables that go in the cornucopia. So I hope you enjoy it.